Why didn't he or she get a second date? She brought her kid to the restaurant without actually telling me she had a kid. Then she saw her friend outside. She got up and left me with her child who I'd never met and had a 15-minute conversation outside. That child must have seen many dates. Story 2. A friend of mine told me about a date she went on. It was great. They both liked each other and made plans for a second date with lots of chemistry. As they left the restaurant, she slipped on some snow and ice, twisting her ankle. He just laughed at her and walked away. He texted later about the second date. She ignored him. Story 3. After going out of town for the weekend, I dropped her off at her friend's house, which was an hour away from where I lived at the time. I told her I had to get back home to get ready for work the next day. She was begging me to stay and hang out some more. I kept saying I had to go home. After about 15 minutes, I went to go to my car to leave. Chomped onto the hood of my car and refused to get off. After 10 more minutes of trying to talk her down, I gave up. Got into my car, locked the doors, tilted the seat back, and acted like I was taking a nap. She sat on my hood for another 20 minutes or so before it started to rain. That's what finally got her off my car. Fine, go home. See if I care. Or something whiny like that, and she stormed off into her friend's house. Never contacted her again. Story 4. She ordered an obnoxious amount of expensive food while I barely ate one order. She then passed me the bill, thinking I'm dumb, flagged the waiter and asked them to rewrite their order as separate bills. Paid for mine and left her there. Story 5. I have a very common last name. She had the same last name. Day went well. She said she couldn't go out with me on a second date, though, because it felt too weird. She explained that both her father and her brother also have the same first name as me. So all three of us have the exact same first and last name. I was like, whoa, yeah, that would be weird for me too. And we actually ended up staying pretty good friends after. Story 6. She was one of the cutest girls I met online and we had a nice dinner. Then she asked if I wanted to meet up with her friends for more drinks down the street. I thought that was fine. It seemed like a good sign she wanted to keep hanging out. However, she didn't say another word to me the rest of the night once we met up with them. We just sat and listened to their conversation for an hour, then awkwardly left. Story 7. We were eating dinner at a mall restaurant, maybe Hard Rock, her treat. We were making small talk, and she said something blatantly prejudiced. I said something about how I don't think that way, and she pointed to a table nearby and said, I suppose you think that is cute? In reference to a nearby black couple's baby. I finished my free food and never saw her again. Story 8. Took out a girl who I'd known for about a dozen years and had a crush on for the first few years when we met in our early 20s. We reconnected after not having seen each other in a while. Felt like something was there, so I asked her out. We planned a late morning hike with her dogs, then lunch. I get there and she's not ready, because she's badly hungover. I wait around over an hour while she gets ready. She brings a flask of whiskey on the hike. At lunch, we do a dog-friendly bar patio. She orders multiple drinks. A waitress pulls me aside to tell me she's intentionally not coming by the table so the date can't order more. She makes quick friends with another table and gets them to buy her a couple shots. On the drive home, she asks me to stop by the liquor store. I refuse, and she tells me if I don't, she'll drive to one after I drop her off, so I stop by the store to prevent her ending someone. I drop her off and she asks if I want to come in and hang out. I say no and drive off. 2 weeks later, when she hits me up, I tell her I'm not interested. That was also the end of our friendship. Story 9. We sat down for a few drinks and food at a beer garden. She immediately proceeded to tell me how much men love her and want to be with her and are obsessed with her. I should be lucky I'm getting this time with her. She's very high maintenance, and then a group of her friends showed up shortly after to tell me essentially the same thing as they went to go sit at a table about 5 feet away. It was so strange. I still don't know if that was supposed to Jedi mind trick me into being obsessed with her or something, but it set off enough alarms. This was also before any drinks were involved. Story 10. I made her dinner and drinks. She proceeded to have too many. Apparently 2 is too many for her and got belligerently intoxicated. She then started speaking aggressively and claimed I was trying to take advantage of her. Full stop. Time to end this. I offered to buy her a rideshare home, but she claimed that would divulge her address. I then offered to send her funds to cover the trip to keep her identity safe. There and back in the morning. She then pushed me and screamed that I was keeping her there against her will, but I wasn't in her way. She could leave at any time. I shut up and went into another room till she drove away. She then texted me in the morning asking when I was going to pick her up to get her car. Apparently all this was my fault in her head. Story 11. It was me. I didn't get the second day because I don't have social media. Therefore, she concluded I had stuff to hide. Called me a creep, got up and left. It came up literally within the first 5 minutes because she was glued to her phone and I, trying to get an actual conversation in, asked her what the difference was between Instagram and Facebook. I think that qualifies as the worst date I've ever been on, yet I still vividly remember how relieved I was that I still had the rest of the evening to myself. Felt like Neo, dodging bullets. Story 12. Beautiful Southeast Asian woman began to pursue me on OkCupid about 10 years ago. We're messaging, we drop numbers, and she sets a date. I'm half expecting to be catfished, but she shows up for a coffee and a walk. She looks like a picture, speaks perfect English, and we have a cute little early afternoon walkabout. She's into me, seems to think I'm funny, and is really interested in whatever boring engineering school classes I'm telling her about. She tells me she's in school and that she's a dancer. I take this to mean she's a dance major. We end up back in my apartment, and things go unexpectedly far when we fool around. She's good. Only woman I've met in my life who could get me anywhere with her hands. The date is going so well. She asks if she can stick around and take me to dinner. She wants to pay. At this point, I'm enamored but confused. This girl is solidly out of my league and seems to also have more money than me. We go to dinner and the picture starts to clarify. Dancer meant something else. It is revealed she has a baby and is only 8 months postpartum. There's a violent ex in the picture. At the moment, none of this is a deal breaker. I'm a lonely, broke 21-year-old engineering student, and a beautiful woman is actively courting me. Then the drinks come. She's rapidly trashed. I'm drinking half as much, and I'm quite intoxicated. She starts telling me how I'm going to turn her life around for her. That I'm going to meet her mother tomorrow and show her family that she met a nice man who can earn. That I'm going to be a good example for her son. That I could totally kick her ex's back. Then the babysitter calls. Apparently, she has to go home right now and gets belligerent when I try to order her a cab. She physically wrestles with me to try and drive her car while nearly black out, and finally I made the decision to drive her home in her vehicle so she doesn't crash into a pole. She's all over me while I'm trying to sober up enough to leave because I don't have $20 for a cab home. I did not meet up with her family the next day. I was really mad about feeling manipulated into driving and realized that no matter how hot she was, nothing was worth having a hurricane like her in my life. Story 13. I'm gonna purposely keep this vague. He was my type, rather sweet at first and on messages. Then we did the video date. He just complained about women the whole time and told me, "Oh, but I don't mean you," after saying the most vicious crap in the world about women online or in his life. Also, he was super dodgy about everything I was doing while we were on a call. How I cooked things, an experiment for class I had going on the back counter he didn't like the look of, what I was wearing as it didn't seem feminine, etc. His overall vibe felt unsafe and rather unstable. I'm kind of glad he stopped talking to me because I felt like if I had blocked or anything, he'd have come to the school or something. Story 14. Tinder Day bragged about knowing everything about me. My Tinder profile only had my first name, my university, and some stupid phrase. That's it. Apparently, he had gone to one of my university's pages and searched everyone with my fairly common first name and found my Facebook profile that way. I figured out my last name, and from there he found the few public posts I had and also found my Instagram. I'm all for searching someone before you go out with them, but bragging to me that he knows my mother's name and how many siblings I have and what kind of dog I have, you can bet I fixed my privacy settings right after getting home from that date. Story 15. It was more like not getting a third or fourth date, but it was her house that I couldn't look past. I assumed it was her parents' or maybe grandparents' place at first due to the aesthetics. The whole place is covered in tacky, kitschy decor that would only look good to someone deeply steeped in the 1990s home and garden magazine culture. Pseudo-antique stuff. Plastic flowers, busy wallpaper, folksy wooden signs and crap. The whole thing. Like a Cracker Barrel had a baby with a mid-range nursing home. There was plastic in the upholstered furniture and an extremely obsolete flat-screen TV in the mantel. Absurdly high up, angled 45 degrees away from the couch for some reason and partially obscured by more plastic plants. Lots of pointless decorative end tables and stuff cluttering up every path through the house. It unearthed ancient feelings of being cooped up in Grandma's house with nothing to do that I had long forgotten about. Very stuffy and sort of frozen in time at the peak of an aesthetic that I hated, even when it was popular 30 years ago. Turned out it was actually her house, which she decorated like that on purpose, from scratch. It further turned out that it was a few blocks away from her childhood home in one direction and a few blocks away from her workplace in the other direction. Said workplace turned out to be her first job she got in high school at about 15 years old and just never left. She was 37 years old. Very nice girl, but once I saw her house and came to understand that she was utterly content to spend her entire life living and working in one generic block of one generic Maryland suburb, I just couldn't take it. I'm glad she's happy with her life and all, but I just realized really quickly that it was a life I didn't want anything to do with. Story 16. We were at a restaurant that he visits a lot, so he knew the workers well and was friendly with a bartender who seemed interested in him. Halfway through the date, after talking to the bartender a few times, he flat out asks her on a date in front of me. She was a little confused since he was there with me, but said yes. I was sitting there okay, this is awkward. And before she left to go take care of other customers, he goes, "I'm just messing with you. You're definitely not my type." And she looked so sad and upset. She was such a sweet and gorgeous Latina girl, so that was super confusing. When she walked away, he was like, "I only like white girls like you. I'd never be attracted to someone like her." He's half Mexican too, so like, what the hell? Not sure if he was trying to prove to me other girls are into him or just messing with someone to mess with him, but I hated it so much. I told him that was so rude, and he knew I was so mad at him for hurting this girl's feelings. Like, honestly, he would have gone a second date after asking another girl out in front of me anyway, but add on the immediate rejection of the girl to mess with or embarrass her, and then the discrimination, and it was the fastest 180 turn against a guy for me that I've ever had in a date before. Story 17. Her job. We met online and decided to grab a drink. The day was going well, and eventually we started talking about what we each did for work. She had told me online that she was a nurse, but during the date, she clarified that she actually worked in pharmaceutical testing. Her company was currently testing medicines for depression. Then she went on to explain how depression medicines are tested on mice. Apparently, they breed mice to be depressed and then administer the medicine to see how their behavior changes. The industry standard for measuring depression in mice is something called a bucket method. What really threw me off was the sheer number of mice involved. I couldn't wrap my head around dating someone whose job involved doing that all day. There's no second date. Story 18. Matched with a girl online and we chatted for about 2 days. She asked me if I wanted to go on a 1-hour out-of-town trip with her for our first meeting, and I declined and said, "How about we get dinner first?" She said okay and asked me to pick her up. Didn't think anything of it. Dinner day came and I picked her up. She told me she was bringing her camera, which was a big professional-style camera. On the drive out there, she told me that she brought her Care Bears to take photos of the food. I said, "Care Bears?" Sure enough, she pulls out small little Care Bears from her purse. And I was like, "Oh, okay." During the drive, she kicked off her shoes and sat cross-legged in the passenger seat with no socks. I was like, "Okay." I told her before we got to the restaurant that I was on a diet, eating less than 1,200 calories, and my meal portions were usually small. This girl was insanely skinny. She told me that the restaurant we were going to was really good and that we should split whatever we get so we can try a little bit of everything. I said okay. She proceeded to order like 3 appetizers, 3 entrees, and dessert. When they brought the food out, she told me to hold on while she took photos from virtually every angle with her big camera and the Care Bears next to the food. I was like, what the hell? So after about 5 minutes of her taking photos, she started handing me a plate one at a time and said we could start eating. I made a dent in one of my plates where she proceeded to inhale everything else. And I was like, bro. They finally brought the bill and it was just over $300, and I was like, "Oh, okay, let's go Dutch." And she was like, "Oh, I didn't realize, I didn't think I'd bring..." Started to internally scream like Homer, and I said I got this. Gave my credit card, and we left. Never talked to her again. Thankfully, my best friends all pitched in to help pay that off. Story 19. First date, great chemistry. Said he was going to schedule it for another day because he couldn't risk losing me. A week goes by, and it's all small talk. I ask about when we're meeting up, and I'm left on red. A week later, he comments on my IG stories. I ask him what's up, and he says he had phone issues. I ask what kind, and he says, "Do we really need to get into that?" I just said, "Be blessed." Story 20. After meeting online and talking for a couple weeks, we went on an amazing lunch date that turned into an impromptu hike to a gorgeous vista, and into hanging out and connecting over all kinds of topics well into the evening. When we were saying goodnight after spending 8+ hours hitting off on a personal level, she mentioned she had herpes, and that I should know before we go on another date. I was just starting college and didn't understand how to manage a relationship like that, and it scared me off. Story 21. Brought a girl to my apartment, and she was a bit impressed by it. It's nicely decorated, to be fair. Not my merit, but the previous owner. She kept saying that the apartment suited her really well and kept asking me how much I was paying in rent. At some point, I got tired of the question and opened up that it was actually mine. The other day, after she left for work, she gave me more not-so-subtle hints that she wanted someone to buy her stuff, sending links of a purse and shoes she really liked. I stopped messaging her and never invited her out again. There were some other red flags while we were out before coming home. Not related to money, though. But I guess I was thinking too much with the wrong head. Looks like her interest in him was purely materialistic. Story 22. This guy and I went on a date, and it was okay. Everything seemed normal. Now, the second date, he picked me up, and we were driving to a restaurant. We got pulled over, and the cops asked him to get out of the car. After checking his license and registration, they talked for a while until one of the cops asked me for my ID, so I gave it to him. But the cop comes back and asks me if I could do him a big favor. I said, sure. He asked me if I could drive because the homeboy had a suspended license. I said I would, and the cop said to me, "They can buy you an expensive dinner." I drove, but straight home and never saw him again. Story 23. I've mentioned this story here before, but I didn't ask her on one. This woman complained about everything. I asked where she wanted to meet. She told me Panera. She meets me at my house. I drive there and she complains about the traffic. Then we walk in and she complains about the temperature inside. We get to ordering and she complains about how the bread looks. Then we sit and she complains about the artwork, the colors used in the restaurant, the place we chose to sit. It was so packed, so not a choice much. Then she complained about her work, her coworkers, her family. Then we got her food and she complained about that too. I kept asking her questions to get to know her better and she just complained. Then she got on her phone for 10 minutes texting. She apologized, said it was her sister, complained about sister. So we go back to my place and ask if she wants to watch a movie or something on TV, Netflix. She picks the TV show and we watch an episode. She complains, "Oh, I don't really like this episode much." I pick out a movie and she sits and texts while watching. She says she has to go pick up her sister. She goes to give me a kiss on the cheek and I make a little move to the side and shake her hand. She told me, "I had a good time. Call me and we can go out again." I was pretty frank with her. I will be honest, I didn't feel a spark and I don't think another date is going to help that. She looked kind of shocked and then take off and just walked off. I'm sure she complained about me later. Story 24. He was super pushy and insisted he needed to change out of his biking gear in my house. I was still living with my folks at the time, so we had to meet them. Then when we went to the pub, all he talked about was himself, how much he loved his sister and asked me nothing about myself. Then he talked about being a member of a prejudiced political party and was very proud of it. When we got back to mine, I assumed he would change and go. He sprawled out of my bed and waited. It took me about an hour of insisting I was worried about him driving in the dark to leave. I got a text later on, wondering why I cut the night short. When I politely told him I wasn't interested in a second date, I received a reply demanding one. Apparently, I didn't give him enough of a chance. That put me off dating for a while. If you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 25. We had known each other in high school, and he asked me out a few months after we graduated. He knew that I liked theater, but knew nothing about it himself, so he took me to an amateur production of Are You Being Served? That wasn't the reason. He was so nervous, but for some reason wore a suit. Maybe he'd heard that people dress up for the theater. This is in Australia in summer. He sweated through the suit. He kept trying to hold my hand, but it was like holding a warm, wet Play-Doh. That wasn't the reason. The reason he didn't get another day was because before I had a chance to ask him out again, I spotted him on 4 consecutive days in the same train it took to work. He pretended not to see me. Because we went to high school together, I knew where he lived and worked, and he had zero reason to be suddenly matching my exact work commute. To and from. Eventually, my dad came with me to the train station one morning and had a little talk with him. I never saw him again. Story 26. When I asked what she did for a living, she told me she was a sculptor. I was like, wow, an artist. Cool. At the restaurant, I knew she didn't drink, but she had to get up every 5 minutes to go outside to have a cigarette. She smelled like cigarettes, and I hate cigarettes, but whatever. I was trying to make conversation, so I told her about my trip in the summer to Paris where I visited the Rodin Museum, not the one in Philly. She said, "What's that?" I said, "Oh, it's a cool place where Rodin left lots of his work to the people of Paris." She said, "Who's he?" Okay, I'm not an artist, but I was just trying to make conversation, and it ended badly. So I am driving her home, and we kept getting to ritzier and ritzier neighborhoods. Finally, she tells me to stop at her house. This place is like 3 stories and likely 20 to 30 rooms with beautiful landscaped grounds. At the time, I'm a 25-year-old starving grad student driving a beater car, and she's 29 years old, and I'm thinking, damn, this sculpture business must be really flying. So we go in through a side entrance in the back of the house, a little weird, and we enter into a bedroom with an attached bath and a counter with a mini fridge and a microwave. To make a long story a little shorter, it turns out she's a nanny for the kids who lived in the house, not really a sculptor. I'm getting vibes like she wants to sleep with me, and I put this off by asking her to see her sculptures. The only thing she could muster was a small piece of a person doing a ballet-like move that looked like something one might have done in art class in 10th grade. I noped out of there quickly, and somehow managed to ghost her when she was hitting me up for a second date. Really, though, I didn't care about the nanny thing, but the lying, cigarettes, and lack of chemistry was plenty to seal the deal. Story 27. Blind date as a teen. I was not feeling it and started making excuses to take off after a while. I couldn't shake her. Ended up at my house. My grandpa called, and I thought I was saved. Like, yeah, it's my grandpa. I gotta take this call. Didn't faze her at all. Don't remember how I finally got rid of her. I obviously wasn't interested. Her friends hounded me for like a month after rejecting her, even though we had known each other for 2 to 3 hours total. Story 28. I went on a midweek lunch date. We had a great conversation and laughed a lot. It seemed really promising. Afterwards, he asked if he could walk me home. I worked from home. I said he could walk me halfway home, but I don't know him well enough yet to bring me to my house. As we walked, he kept pushing and pushing until I put my foot down and told him I was going my own way. This was when he told me that compatibility is really important and that if I wouldn't take him home right then and there, I had to promise to sleep with him on a second date. Needless to say, there was no second date. Story 29. Restaurant accidentally gave her order to the table beside us. Those two women originally only ordered an 8-piece to split between the two of them, so they kept their mouths shut until it came out that the huge platter was not theirs. Honestly, I can't blame them. The staff were extremely apologetic and offered us wine, food, etc. on the house to make up for the oopsie. I started and ended my complaint of this courtesy by claiming the other table's original 8-pieces from the poor embarrassed waiter. My tummy was grumbling. Ordering another appetizer of dumplings and a tiny soju for us to split while we waited in our platter. Rather than being slightly annoyed at a long wait, but happy that we were making out like bandits, she just kinda sulked that it even happened. I was kind of ecstatic because in my raised lower income brain, I saw it as bluntly as you're getting more than you paid for. You get bonus food, all it took was some patience and being nice to the staff. Leftovers that could actually be enjoyed versus just savoring the scraps of a once great meal. She was very nice otherwise, but I've learned that I need somebody that'll appreciate those brighter moments in an otherwise cold, dark world. I can't date a brooding black cat as a part-time Eeyore. Lol. Story 30. I've told the story before, but it's always good for a few laughs, so here goes. High school. Girl in my class that I'm reasonably attracted to. We're reasonably friendly at school. Ask her out. She says yes. All is good. Now I know that she's a good girl, and to be honest, I have zero experience. So I'm just playing it cool, making sure to be respectful, etc. Go out to eat. Go to a movie. There's no major chemistry, but I don't really know what to expect, and things seem to go well enough. I mean, we talk back and forth like we always had at school, right? I show up to class on Monday and find a note waiting for me. In it, I discovered that she had come to realize that it was not God's will that we'd date again. And that, friends, was that. Shut down by the big guy upstairs. Story 31. We went out for some drinks. Had a good time. She took me back to her flat to meet her flatmates, and I figured the day had gone very well and I was staying the night with her. After another drink with her flatmates, her phone rang. She answered it, spoke to the person briefly, then said she had to go, but thought I could sleep in her bed that night to save me walking home. Turns out she got called and went round to another guy's flat. I walked home. Story 32. This is why I didn't get a second date. My best friend sent me up on a blind date. His girlfriend was a teacher and had another teacher she wanted to set me up with. Very attractive. Very nice. Double date. We all meet and have plans to go to a comedy club about 1.5 hours away. Buddy and I start drinking and his girlfriend drives. We don't eat and go straight to the CC. Not good. Drink there and decide to go to a club afterwards. By this time, I'm intoxicated. I end up out on the dance floor. Mind you, I can't dance sober and more or less start doing the SNL skit of the Two Schmucks nightclub guys. Any random woman out there. We finally leave the club to head home and stop at a Taco Bell. I get out and yak. Maybe yacked again on the way home. I don't know. Boom. Shockingly, no second date. Oh, if I could only do my 20s over. Story 33. She invited me over and then started texting someone else halfway through. Then she made a terrible excuse to cut the night short, presumably to have her preferred suitor over. She texted me the next day and tried calling, and I just ignored them. We weren't exclusive or anything, but I'm an adult, and I don't like liars. Just go up and tell the truth if you'd rather hang out with someone else. Story 34. He spent the whole time whining about how girls hate short guys when it's never mattered to me, put his hand on my thigh within 10 minutes of meeting me and didn't get up to greet me. Just informed me he had a beer already and I can get on my own if I wanted to. I faked an emergency and leaned over to give a sympathetic smooch. Also, his name was Hervey. That's not a typo. Story 35. Met up and she seemed nice enough, but a little distracted. Chatting away over coffee, I noticed her fingernails were long-ish, but the very ends were ragged and her nail polish was flaking away from the ends, like she'd been chewing on just the tips. Just seemed off. She'd occasionally do a 1,000-yard stare and just zone out for 5 or 10 seconds. Then she mentioned she had decided to stop taking her brain medication a few weeks before, but was now feeling much better. I don't exactly know what the meds were for, and I'm not judging as I'm on my own set of pills for depression, etc., but yeah, doing that without medical advice or supervision isn't ideal. Date ended with no commitment to meet again. That night, about 3 a.m., I got a string of text messages from her, just random phrases and words. Replied with some less than polite words and blocked the number. Story 36. Oh boy, I've got 2 good ones. I sure know how to pick 'em. Precursor. I'm now happily married, but I went on a coffee date at like 1 p.m. with a girl at a super cool coffee shop in the downtown area. It had 2 floors and a very cool vibe. One of my go-to spots. We started chatting and things were going all right, but I started to notice that she was like 1 or 2 octaves higher than any other conversation happening in the coffee shop, and I noticed many people looking irritated in our direction. Then she started talking about how screwed up I got at other parties with her girls and how she would drink and smoke heavily. I just became incredibly embarrassed at this conversation that everyone was hearing, and thus, never a second date. But it gets better. My second non-second date was during the winter, and where I live gets a lot of snow. I was chatting with this girl from a somewhat sketchy website while I was out plowing snow in the middle of the night. She said she was out clubbing with her sister. And we kept texting throughout the night, and I stupidly asked if she wanted to get some food since we were both out and awake at like 1 in the morning. She obliged, and we met up at a Perkins at like 1:30 in the morning. I was starving, so I chose the spot. We showed up at the same time, and she asked a cigarette as she got out of the car. We sat down, and I ordered some food and offered to pay for hers, but she wasn't hungry, so it was just me eating, which made me feel awkward. During the hangout, she sort of offhandedly mentioned that she was married and had 2 kids from the previous marriage, information I had no previous prompting to receive. That threw me for a loop. I was 22 at the time, and that was basically it. I'm stellar at planning dates. Story 37. Phew, I tried, but she was still thinking about her ex the whole time. We went to this bar, didn't speak to me for like 3 hours. Want a drink? No. Want to dance? No. Want to get out here, take a walk? No. I walked her home, tried to ask her for a second date because, hey, everyone is nervous, right? She wasn't ready and was hoping her ex would come back to her. He didn't. This was 2 years ago and she's still single. This other time, I drove like 2 hours to meet this girl I started talking to on the internet. She said she didn't feel much for dating, but she said, "You feel special." I were supposed to go to a restaurant near her. When I got to her place, it reeked. Like it really stank. Overall creep vibes, and while I'm not known for my hygiene per se, I felt dirty leaving that place. I never went to that restaurant and she offered to make dinner. I refused. I felt sick. The air was humid and sticky. This is the one and only time I ever ghosted someone. Story 38. She was a sweet girl and decent looking. She had a good conversation and loved her cat, saying it was her best friend. She was a cute animal lover, I thought. As the day continued, it became very clear that her cat was not only her best friend, but her only friend. I was sure I would not be seeing her again. I told her at the end of the night that our personalities and lifestyles would not match. Paid for the dinner and told her I had a great night. Also, let her know that she'll definitely find someone more her speed to be with. Hope she finds him. Story 39. I got asked out by a customer at a restaurant and thought, what the hell? On our date, he casually mentioned he came in and had asked out my friend, but she said no. I said, what the hell, dude? And left after I paid for my food. He came by my work 3 times and once with flowers. It was weird and creepy. I gave off desperate vibes. Story 40. He endangered both of our lives by driving crazy. Invited a third person to the dinner we were supposed to go to, but didn't even get to eat because he threw a tantrum about it being too slow since the food didn't arrive at a fast food pace. And didn't even drop me off at the agreed location in the end because of a headache, but proceeded to still go out and post about it later that night. Exhausting. Worst date ever. Story 41. My cat didn't like him. She was a very good judge of character. Her final act before she passed away was approving my future husband. Lol. But before him, she hated this one guy. The one time he came to pick me up at my place, she hissed and growled. He was right. He had a kid. I was very clear that I didn't want to date anyone with kids, though he lied and said he didn't have kids. And I found out because he followed me on TikTok and had videos on his profile of him with his kid. He said the kid wasn't actually his and his ex cheated on him. But then he slipped and said he was fighting for custody. I questioned why if the kid wasn't his, and he said, no, she is. I don't actually want her. I'll drop the case to be with you. Like the lying aside, that's a disgusting thing to say about a child, especially if he was actually her father. Don't choose someone you met in person once over your own kid, for Christ's sake. Story 42. Bad enough I'm Michael and her name was Michelle. When we went on a first date, we realized that not only did we share the same birthday, we shared the same hospital and ward. Started to feel like a strange separated or switched at birth situation. My God, she was beautiful, but genuinely couldn't shake the odd feeling. Oddly met another girl a few years later. Also the same birthday and the same hospital. Made me question how many are born per day in that hospital. Story 43. After showing up 30 minutes late, she proceeded to complain about how all of her previous dates had dressed, calling out certain things that also applied to me. She also said multiple times how she was going to a pool party after our date. Then she proceeded to flirt with the bartender for an hour. At some point, she said something like, "This isn't working out," and just left. The bartender offered me a drink, and when he gave me the bill, it definitely didn't include everything, so I guess that worked out. Story 44. She didn't look anything like her Tinder profile, and then insisted I come down to her apartment that stunk really bad because she had her pet rats. She didn't mention she had a kid until I saw all the baby stuff. And then she put on a Gretzko and we watched that for like an hour. I think if I would have made a move, maybe we would have gone further, but in retrospect, I'm glad nothing happened. I bet her Tinder profile picture was taken in a heavily filtered bathroom mirror. Story 45. A guy took me on a date a few years ago. I ordered something super small for around $2, equating to dollars from my local currency. While he ordered himself an appetizer, mains, dessert, and even snacks to take away for his sister, when the waiter handed him the bill, he looked at me expecting to pay my $2. I told him I only had a $20 bill. He took it, handed me $8 from his wallet, and then gave the waiter my $20. Even then, I thought maybe he had done some math in his head. But when the waiter came back with the change, he took it and put it in his wallet. Then my phone went out and I had no way of getting home, plus it was pouring. He said bye-bye and left me at the restaurant in the rain with no way of getting home. Story 46. Went to a small party at her house with a six-pack of her favorite beer, and when I asked her where I should put it, she immediately snapped at me to find a place for it. Later that night, when most everyone had left, she tried to put some moves on, but having been in a relationship with someone entirely too quick to anger, I wasn't keen. Story 47. My friend sent me on a blind double date without telling me it was a blind date. During the conversation, the girl started talking about how she wants her boyfriend to have masculine energy, how she doesn't want him to show emotions, and how he must be strict and jealous of her. I honestly said that I'm not a masculine energy guy she wants, and told her I'm not interested in a relationship where I can't share my emotions, and I'm not into controlling or limiting my loved ones out of jealousy. I also explained why such expectations can contribute to higher male depression rates. 2 days later, out of the blue, she asked me for a second date, and I simply told her, nope. Story 48. Because he showed up intoxicated and immediately proceeded to call me the wrong name. I corrected him, but he could not get it through his brain that my name was not, in fact, Emily. We were at a college bar and I agreed to walk back to a party that was happening at his place because I was friends with some of his housemates. After he introduced me as Emily for the third or fourth time to random people, I finally just turned around and started walking out the door. He yelled across the room at me, "Emily, where are you going?" Story 49. She brought her youth pastor as her chaperone and didn't say another word that wasn't dragged out of her. The interesting, confident girl I met a couple days before, who asked if I'd show her Star Wars and wanted to talk about myths, was gone. Replaced by a timid girl who didn't seem to have opinions and in a plain dress she looked too warm. She didn't even get ice cream when we were at a place she wanted to try and had suggested we go to. Looking back, she was clearly in deep with some religion or cult or other, and I probably dodged a bullet by not seeking a second date. I hope she's doing okay, but there's no way I could have helped her with that crap as a freshman in college. Story 50. She didn't even get a first because some fat chick came over to the table while I was waiting for her and started asking me questions. I obliged for a few minutes, but then someone came over with food. This chick I don't know ordered food to my table and started eating it while I was supposed to be waiting for someone else. I was only 17. It made me feel weird as hell, so I left. Back then we didn't have phones and stuff, so I basically stood this girl up. I feel terrible about it. She was cool. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're gonna love this. Catch you in that video.